There are players out there available so cheap or even for free in Dynasty leagues who can contribute to your teams in the season. And they are going so under the radar because they're veterans, they're not sexy names, they're not rookies, but these are players that you have to go out and buy, and you can get them basically for free. In this video, I've got 6 players you need to be stashing at the bottom of your bench, all of whom have a real chance to contribute in 2025 and beyond. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and subscribing. But let's get into the first name, who is going so under the radar despite seeing 140 targets in 2024. Wan'Dale Robinson saw the 10th highest amount of targets in 2024 and had the 10th highest number of receptions, which genuinely feels insane when you think about the fact that he finished as the wide receiver 36. He saw so many targets in this offense, but his ADOT was only 4.4 yards, and he had to create 7.5 yards after reception. He's a slot player, but he was essentially used as a yards after the catch threat working underneath, which isn't a surprise given that he is 5'8" and has showed 4.44 speed at the combine a few years ago. 4.44 feels like a very strange number to say. It doesn't sound very real. Now, obviously, the depth chart was so wide open in 2024 with Daniel Jones as the starter and a few other players as the starters as well in New York. It was basically just between Malik Neighbors, who had the second highest amount of targets in the NFL last year, and then Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, obviously, going into this year, you'd think they'd bring in someone else to compete, but ultimately, they didn't. They are still going into this season with a depth chart in the receiving game of Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, and Theo Johnson. There is absolutely no reason why Wan'Dale Robinson can't see a similar amount of targets going into this next season. Now, definitely in PPR leagues, he is going to be more important and someone that you want to be able to start. He has an incredibly high floor, but an incredibly low ceiling. It's basically just this. That's his floor versus his ceiling. There's no chance he finishes as a top 24 wide receiver, but if he sees the same target rate he saw last year, he is someone that is great to be able to put into your flex. And it's just a huge surprise to me that he was 10th in targets and 10th in receptions last year, and yet seemed to make very little noise in the fantasy community. In 2024, Michael Wilson saw the 3rd highest target share on the Cardinals, a team that is relatively pass happy but lacks receiving depth in their passing game. Now, he only translated this to just over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, but the notable point is that the Cardinals did not make any improvements to their receiving core. The Cardinals definitely misprofiled their top receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, using him more as an outside X wide receiver when actually MHJ is better when he's being used across the formation and being used on crossing routes working horizontally. If they are able to make that change going into 2025, Michael Wilson is going to see a huge amount of the outside X work, which is obviously where he works best as a 6'5" X basketball player. Michael Wilson Jr. again might not have the highest ceiling in this offense, with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. guaranteed to see the highest target share. But 500 yards and 5 touchdowns is nothing to sniff at, and definitely provides some spike weeks as we saw last season. If there's an injury to MHJ, Michael Wilson suddenly becomes the top receiver on an offense that we want shares in with Kyler Murray. But he is basically free in your dynasty leagues because he's not really been able to produce on the 3rd round draft capital that we saw from him just a few seasons ago. But with an empty depth chart, there is a clear opportunity for him to contribute. And in best ball, he is going to have spike weeks because there's just nothing else in this receiving chart to mean that he is not going to get a similar number of targets to last season. I looked recently and under 10% of my viewers are subscribed to the channel. The figure you just saw below is actually wrong. It's an old screenshot, so it's even less now. It's about 9.7%. You need to help me change that. Subscribe to the channel and check out all of the other things that I've got going on. Yeah, just click subscribe. There's nothing else. Just click subscribe. Hollywood Brown feels like a very strange player to point out as a deep stash and someone that's available incredibly cheap in your dynasty leagues. But when I was having a look through some consensus values recently, he is available in startups all the way down in the 14th round, and he is ranked on Keep Trade Cut within the wide receiver 80 to 90 mark. Hollywood is going so under the radar when you consider that this was someone that was going in the fourth or fifth round of redraft last season, as people were trying to figure out between him, Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice who the wide receiver one on this team was going to be. Now, unfortunately, Hollywood basically missed the whole season, at least until playoffs, with an injury, but he is fully healthy coming into this season. This is someone who just a couple of seasons ago in Baltimore finished as a top 20 wide receiver, and now he is paired with just as good a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and the depth chart is still just as empty with just Worthy, Rice, and obviously the ghost of Travis Kelce and Jalen Lane, if you count that as a Jalen Royals. Jalen Royals. There are a lot of Jalen's in this draft class. I forget which one went where. I think Jalen Royals, Jalen Lane went to the Commanders. Anyway, Hollywood has a real chance to feature as a prominent part of this passing game, with Travis Kelce truly declining, Rashee Rice working best underneath, and Xavier Worthy having an up and down rookie season. He got paid a huge amount by the Chiefs last offseason with I think it's 7 million in guarantees. It's a 1-year deal. If he can get back to the way he was a couple of seasons ago, functioning as a deep threat and someone who can work the ball underneath for yards after the catch, there's a world in which Hollywood is extremely relevant this next season. But because of the injury last season, he is being incredibly forgotten. So I'm not sleeping on Hollywood for this next season. I'm going to do a video later in this offseason ranking backup running backs and thinking about who I would target, particularly looking in redraft leagues, but also it's worth targeting them in dynasty leagues as well. And I think one who goes really under the radar as probably the top priority backup that I would be targeting is Tyler Allgeier. Now, Tyler Allgeier came into the NFL with a bang, finishing with a 1,000-yard season. The Falcons then repaid that by drafting Bijan Robinson in the next draft. Bijan is obviously the bell cow in this offense, although they do sometimes like giving Tyler Allgeier goal line work. As you'll know, if you're a Bijan Robinson fancy owner and you're watching Red Zone and you see the Falcons rush the ball and you celebrate, and then you go, that's not a number 7 on the back of the jersey, and it's a 25. And Tyler Allgeier stole the goal line work. Because Bijan is the bell cow in the offense, Tyler Allgeier is not really going to have a huge amount of standalone value. But if Bijan did see an injury, Tyler Allgeier would work in as the 3-down workhorse back. They don't really have a huge amount after him, and we've seen him succeed in the NFL before. Tyler Allgeier is basically available for free, and while it's worth keeping in mind that he is still an injury away, if we were to see that injury to Bijan Robinson, not only would he be a huge asset to your fantasy team, you would also be able to sell him for an absolute haul to a contender for this next season. Talking about backup running backs, another one that I really think you need to stash is Jaylen Wright. The Dolphins' rushing scheme is really up and down. It's something that when Mike McDaniel first went to the Dolphins, we were incredibly excited about, seeing the nuances of how they'd work in the running game and the way in which they were able to absolutely stomp over opponents, particularly with Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert a couple of seasons ago. Now, Mostert has moved on and is now the backup to Ashton Genty in Las Vegas. And that makes last year's third-round pick, Jaylen Wright, the backup running back to Achane. Wright profiles relatively similar to Achane, being a smaller back who is incredibly quick, best as a one-cut runner and able to get to the edge to be a defender in that outside zone rushing scheme. That means that he profiles as the direct backup to Achane and a like-for-like replacement. Now, Achane has been elite the last few seasons, but he has struggled with injury in his first couple of seasons. He really struggled in his rookie season, and in the second season as well, he was on and off the field a lot. It was a lot of projection for him because when he was on the field, he was elite, but it was very difficult to actually see him play that often. An injury to Achan would see Jaylen Wright be the RB1 in this offense. And whilst this offense has been on the decline the last couple of seasons, particularly last year, we know that Mike McDaniel can coach an incredible running game when things are working in his favor, and they have upgraded the offensive line that really, really needed that improvement. Jaylen Wright also could figure to be the RB2, and that can have some standalone value, as we saw with a couple of seasons ago when Achan and Mostert both finished as top 5 running backs in points per game. He is available incredibly cheap, as backup running backs tend to be this time of year, but if you can get him for around a third round pick, that is something I would be looking to do. He could definitely have standalone value, but that injury to a back we've seen struggle with injury before would see him become an elite asset for this next season. JT Sanders of the Carolina Panthers very quietly put together an okay rookie season for a tight end, finishing with just under 400 yards, but including a 5-game stretch in the middle of the season where he finished with 5 or more targets in 4 of those weeks. Now, obviously, these aren't incredibly impressive stats, but for a rookie tight end, they are nice to see. He did struggle with injury in his rookie season as well, particularly with a neck injury after a hard landing, after actually a fantastic catch that we saw around the later weeks of the year. Now, we know that the Panthers' offense was really stagnant last year, and there was a huge amount of development to be seen. But we did see the start of that from Bryce Young. And as I said in my last video, this is an offense that I want to be targeting. They are still a little bit light in the receiving game, obviously targeting Ted McMillan in the first round, which I was delighted to see as a huge Ted McMillan fan. But the role is still open for someone to establish themselves as the second and third options between Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen, and JT Sanders. He was taken the first pick of the 4th round last season, and he has a really obvious chance to step in as the tight end 1 in this offense, with Tommy Tremble being his only other threat, and Tremble being more of an H-back or a fullback type, but definitely more of a blocking tight end than a receiving tight end. Sanders showed in college that he can be a fantastic asset in the receiving game. He's absolutely gigantic, and he is a good blocker as well. It often takes tight ends a little bit of time to break out and to actually develop a little bit of the nuances of the position, and JT Sanders is someone that I'd love to target incredibly cheap as someone that has a chance to break out at the top of the depth chart this coming season.